While it is wise to save for the future,
Your savings are being stolen. Right now, not by a hacker, but by the very system designed to protect you. The US government owes $38 trillion, and they have a secret plan to pay it back. They aren't going to cut spending. They aren't going to default. They're using a 1940 strategy called financial repression to burn away your purchasing power while you sleep. By the time you finish your morning coffee, another $7 billion gets added to that debt. But here's what they're counting on. You won't notice how they make it disappear. Here's exactly how they're doing it, and what it means for every dollar you've saved. After World War II, America faced a debt crisis. Debt to GDP topped 100%. The government had two choices: admit bankruptcy or find another way. They chose something brilliant and brutal. Economist Carmen Reinhart documented it in her research on debt liquidation. Between 1945 and 1980, real interest rates stayed negative roughly half the time. The U.S. and U.K. erased 3 to 4% of GDP annually in debt. Through this method, the mechanism was simple: keep interest rates below inflation. Capital controls and regulations created captive audiences. Banks were required to hold treasury bonds. Pension funds had mandates. Savers had nowhere else to park money. The debt never got paid. It got burned away. Every year, what the government owed became worth less in real terms. Bondholders got repaid in devalued dollars. Savers watched purchasing power evaporate. They called it financial stability. Historians call it the silent tax. That playbook never went away. They just got better at hiding it. Let me show you something they hope you never calculate. Right now, the Fed funds rate sits just under 4%. Official inflation? According to the Federal Reserve's own data, core PCE inflation runs at 2.8%. Sounds like you're making money, right? Not quite. That official number doesn't fully capture your actual cost of living. Housing costs, your biggest expense, aren't properly reflected. Tariff-driven price increases haven't hit yet. Your real inflation rate is higher than they're telling you. Pattern B, the math moment. Here's the number that exposes everything. The Treasury pays roughly $1 trillion per year in interest on $38 trillion in total debt. Simple math. That's an average interest rate of about 2.6% across all outstanding bonds. Inflation officially runs between 2.6 and 2.8%. Let that sink in. They're paying you exactly the rate at which your money loses value. Think about what this means. Every dollar the government borrowed 5 years ago when rates were near zero, repaying it in dollars worth 15 to 20% less. You're the one covering the difference. Now here's where it gets infuriating. Not everyone loses in this system. There's a 200-year-old economic principle called the Cantillon effect. Whoever gets newly created money first wins. By the time it reaches you, price is already adjusted. Federal interest payments hit $1.22 trillion in fiscal year 2025. Where does that money go? To primary dealers, the major banks with direct access to treasury auctions. Here's how it works in practice. Imagine the Fed prints money and gives it to Goldman Sachs first. They buy a house for $500,000. By the time that money trickles down to your paycheck, that same house costs $800,000. Same house. You just got the money last. They take your purchasing power and convert it into assets before inflation catches up. Real estate, stocks, commodities. Your wages adjust 12 to 18 months later, long after asset prices already rose. The wealth gap isn't accidental. It's engineered into the monetary system. Want to verify this yourself? Go to fiscal.treasury.gov and pull up monthly statements. Look at interest on public debt and compare it to official CPI increases. The gap between those numbers shows exactly who's subsidizing whom. Pay close attention to this next part. This is the red flag. Let me show you one of the strangest accounting fictions in the entire U.S. financial system. Pattern E, ghost price versus real price. America holds 261.5 million ounces of gold, the largest reserve on Earth. On official treasury books, this gold is valued at $42.22 per ounce, a price frozen by law in 1973. Current market price? Around $3,300 per ounce. Official government accounting says $11 billion in gold value. Actual market value, approximately $863 billion. That's an $852 billion hidden asset sitting on the balance sheet. Now here's the red flag. In August 2025, the Federal Reserve published research examining how 5 countries, Germany, Italy, Lebanon, Curacao, and South Africa, used gold revaluation proceeds to retire debts in exceptional fiscal circumstances. The Fed doesn't publish academic research for fun. They're studying options. The mechanism is simple. Congress passes a bill revaluing gold to market prices. The Treasury balance sheet instantly improves by $852 billion. They could retire debt, fund programs, or create the sovereign wealth fund proposals currently circulating. When the Federal Reserve publishes a study on this exact scenario 8 months ago, that's not theory. That's preparation.
We'll make sure it's handled
While this happens domestically, watch what's happening globally. BRICS started as 5 countries. In 2024, it expanded to include the UAE, Iran, Egypt, and Ethiopia, with Saudi Arabia joining as a partner nation. This coalition now controls over 45% of global oil production and more than 30% of world GDP. And they're done playing by dollar rules. China and Russia now conduct most bilateral trade in yuan and rubles. Brazil and China signed a direct currency settlement agreement. India purchases Russian oil in rupees. These aren't symbolic gestures. These are operational payment systems. For 50 years, the petrodollar forced every nation to hold dollar reserves to buy oil. Oil exporters recycled those dollars into U.S. Treasury bonds. We printed dollars, they gave us oil, then they lent the dollars back at low rates. Perfect arrangement. Until now, China became Saudi Arabia's largest oil customer, accounting for over 20% of the kingdom's oil exports. When your biggest customer wants to pay in yuan, the petrodollar dies quietly. China's cross-border interbank payment system now links 4,800 banks across 185 countries. That's a fully operational alternative to the dollar-based SWIFT network. Do you think the US dollar will lose its reserve status by 2030? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you think. Here's why this matters to you personally. As these countries dump dollar reserves, those dollars return home. More dollars chasing the same amount of American goods. That's your grocery bill going up. The Federal Reserve is caught in an impossible position. They cut interest rates 3 times in late 2025, even though inflation stayed above their 2% target all year. Why would they do that? Because debt service costs are already the second largest item in the federal budget, bigger than everything except Social Security. Every 1% increase in average interest rates adds hundreds of billions to annual payments. According to the Congressional Budget Office, debt held by the public will rise from 100% of GDP to 118% by 2035. At current trajectories, interest payments will crowd out defense, infrastructure, everything. So the Fed has no good moves. Raise rates to fight inflation? The budget explodes. Lower rates to ease debt service? Inflation runs wild. The December 2025 Fed meeting featured 3 dissenting votes. Members couldn't agree whether to go tighter or looser. That's a central bank with no clean options left. Financial repression becomes the default, because it's the only way to manage the debt without triggering immediate crisis. Keep rates below inflation. Burn the real value slowly. Hope voters don't connect their declining standard of living to monetary policy. 3 forces are converging simultaneously, and that's what makes 2026 different. First, the debt crossed the point where even mainstream analysts admit there's a problem. 38 trillion and counting, headed to 118% of GDP within a decade. The numbers are too big to ignore. Second, the 2024 BRICS expansion brought major energy producers into a formal de-dollarization coalition. This isn't speculation anymore. Infrastructure exists. Transactions are happening. The petrodollar system is fragmenting in real time. Third, demographics are about to hit hard. Social Security and Medicare trust funds face insolvency within 7 years. That adds trillions in unfunded liabilities exactly when foreign financing becomes less reliable. These forces amplify each other. BRICS reduces demand for treasuries, forcing higher interest rates. Higher rates explode the deficit. Larger deficits require more financial repression. More repression creates more inflation. More inflation pushes more countries away from the dollar. It's a feedback loop with no emergency brake. Default usually looks dramatic. Missed payments, debt restructuring, IMF bailouts. None of that's happening. But make no mistake, you're watching a default happen in slow motion. Carmen Reinhardt's research proves financial repression works best when accompanied by steady inflation. The inflation doesn't even need to be that high by historical standards. Here's the mechanism. Government borrows $1,000 today, pays 3.5% interest. Inflation runs at 3%. In 10 years, they pay back the $1,000 plus accumulated interest. Sounds fair, except that $1,000 only buys what $737 bought when they borrowed it. You, the bondholder, just lost 26% of your purchasing power. That's default by devaluation. No missed payments, no restructuring, just a quiet, systematic transfer of wealth from lenders and savers to the government. Because it happens gradually, people never connect their declining living standards to monetary policy. They blame corporations for high prices. They blame their wages for not keeping up. They don't see the invisible tax extracted through negative real interest rates. The machinery is elegant, and it's running right now. So what do you actually do with this information? What to watch? 3 red flags. Red flag 1. Federal Reserve balance sheet expansion while inflation stays elevated. They've already announced resuming Treasury purchases, starting with $40 billion in bills. If this accelerates while inflation remains above target, it confirms they've chosen repression over stability. Red flag 2. New regulations requiring retirement accounts to hold minimum amounts of Treasury bonds. Watch for legislation disguised as protecting retirement security that creates captive domestic buyers for government debt. Red flag 3. Gold revaluation proposals in Congress. Bills that fund spending programs through revaluing gold reserves. From $42 to market prices. This signals they've run out of conventional options. Your protection strategy. Understand this. Cash and bonds earning below the real inflation rate are being taxed silently. You're guaranteed to lose purchasing power. History shows that during periods of financial repression, paper assets lose and hard assets win. Gold, land, commodities. This isn't about getting rich. This is about not becoming poor. Track the numbers yourself. Go to bls.gov for inflation data. Compare it to federalreserve.gov interest rate decisions. When real rates stay negative for extended periods, you're being taxed. Watch foreign treasury holdings at ticdata.treasury.gov. When major holders like Japan or oil exporters start selling, the endgame accelerates. This isn't partisan. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, policymakers added $1.5 trillion in new 10-year debt during both parties participated. Make your representatives explain how the math works, because right now it doesn't. The $38 trillion liquidation isn't some future event. It's happening now. Every month you hold assets paying below real inflation. You're participating in your own wealth transfer. It's not about getting rich. It's about not becoming poor. This story isn't over. The next chapter gets written by whether enough people recognize the pattern before the endgame arrives.